My name is Ilyan Iliev, and actually today we will be speaking about security and compliance risks when you deploy into the cloud. And I'll begin with a slide which will introduce me and kind of give you why you should listen to me about security. I've been part of Progress for the last 8 years, and during that time it was quite a journey. I've been part of the founding team for our product, which was named Icenium. That was our mobile application development ID in the cloud. Then that product actually got expanded into Telerik platform, which was full-fledged platform for developing mobile applications, which included mobile backend as a service, analytics solutions, and mobile testing. After that, I worked on the NativeScript project, and I was responsible for the NativeScript cloud builds. This included a public cloud, which most of the users can build their applications, and a private cloud, which was actually the first product that got compliance. Like to SOC 2 and HIPAA compliance. And during the whole time, I was leading the security efforts in our company, at least for the Sofia office and DevTools division. For the last year, I've been part of Kinvey, and currently I'm leading the technical support engineering team and the Kinvey chat team. The NativeScript cloud builds are still alive, so they are still part of that team as well. What about my hobbies? Actually, I am a security researcher and ethical hacker. During my free time, I love to tweak with like kernel stuff and low-level stuff. So during my career, I managed to almost learn to read assembly. So this is something that I'm really proud of. And because of this knowledge, I found a bug in Windows kernel a few years ago, which actually gave me the power to log into every Windows device ever. So I reported that to Microsoft, and they fixed it quite fast, like in a few weeks. But it was a nice experience because at some point of my life I kind of experienced the ability to access everything, and I didn't abuse that, but the feeling was good. What will be on our agenda today? At the beginning, we will be chatting about what is the difference between compliance and security, and this is something really important because if we don't understand that foundation, it will be really hard to speak about the cloud deployment and the risks around that. And during the whole journey, I'll be giving you examples on how we at Progress mitigate all of those risks. But before we continue, I would like to tailor the presentation based on your needs. So I'll be asking 3 questions, and you can vote with raising your hand. The first one is pretty common question. So how many of you have used cloud providers like AWS or Azure? That's good. It's almost the whole room. So the second question is a little bit more tricky. How many of you have participated in compliance efforts like HIPAA, SOC 2, or PCI, or even more people? So that's even better. And the last is how many of you have implemented or integrated intrusion detection systems in your daily work or in your... Okay, that's only 2 people. So let's begin with the difference between security and compliance. The first that we have to get through is the definition of compliance. Compliance is actually conforming to a specific standard that would require the bare minimum. That's why I actually bought that. This is the bare minimum required in order to deal with specific kind of data. Let's take, for example, credit cards. If you have to deal with credit cards and pass them through your applications, then you have to be PCI compliant. And if you have to deal with patient healthcare information, then you have to be HIPAA compliant. And I would stress again that this is the bare minimum. So we have many companies which got hacked and got into the news after being compliant. And this is only the bare minimum that you have to cover in order to deal with that information. The next thing that I would like to take a look at is what is the way to achieve compliance to a certain standard. So you take the whole list of controls, like 400 controls, for example. Then you walk through each one of them and you find evidence or implement your way to gather that evidence in your system. And after that, you just call the auditors, which are external guys from external company, to come to your office and then review all of that evidence in order to certify you for a specific standard. Of course, they can kind of give you guidance on how to implement things better when they see little mistakes here and there. But in order to get compliant, you have to provide evidence on everything that is connected with the controls. The bad thing for that at the current state of compliance efforts is that this is a snapshot at a given time. And if your organization gets audited once a year, for example, during that whole year after the compliance, you will add new products, you change products, you remove products, you change your processes, people leave and stuff. And your compliance, it might change. So you might break some of the controls, and this will not end well if it gets abused. So this is something that we'll talk about later in the presentation. And the other important thing here is that compliance is reactive rather than proactive. So if a certain threat emerges or somebody discovers a loophole in a certain standard, then in order to get that incorporated into the standard, many people will have to take a look at that, review it. Are those the right things to do and stuff? And this will take time. And all companies who are currently compliant to the standard will be vulnerable if they implement it only that bare minimum. The next thing I wanted to review, this will be a quick slide, are what are the groups of standards. So I'll let you kind of read through them, although they are like acronyms for everything. The first group is general laws and regulations. These are the laws which are common for every general group of data. Let's take, for example, GDPR. This is the European law for personal information that was introduced last year in May. The second one is PCI. This is for the credit cards and financial information when you have to do transactions. In the beginning, I think this was actually part of the industry regulations back in the beginning of 2000, but after that everyone started to take payments with credit cards and stuff, so they actually moved that more towards the general laws and regulations. The last example from this group is actually SOX, and that's concerned with public companies and how they deal with financial information, how they disclose it, and it protects on how companies avoid making mistakes in their financial information. And then we have many examples here. I just gave you a few of them. The second group is industry regulations. We have two examples here. One of them is FISMA, and the second one is HIPAA. The first one governs government information, and the second one is healthcare. We have some of those, of course, for Kinvey, but not every single regulation that you can find out there. The third group is key state regulations. I've given two examples. The first is Massachusetts data protection law, and the second one is Nevada's. Those apply to specifics for a certain state in the United States. The next slide is what is security actually. Security actually is more of an art, as I would say. You get into the wild and you review all possible ways in order to get hacked, and you implement different measures on that. based on what you find out there in the wild. That's why I say it's proactive risk assessment, and it's actually related to keeping your data safe. This includes all possible processes that you can imagine, like penetration testing, like ethical hacking, which actually includes penetration testing, and vulnerability scanning. I'm just giving a few examples of those. The important thing here is that it's not measured against controls. You won't be able to find a checklist on how to implement your security, although there are certain ways or processes which are implemented by groups like OWASP, but you still won't get the full checklist like you do in compliance, which includes everything. If you had to remember one thing from that whole group of slides, it will be that compliance is not security. I'll give you an example with Target. Actually, they had PCI compliance when they got hacked, and their CEO went out to the media and said, "We already had PCI compliance, but we still got hacked." Those are his words. So you have to remember that if you are compliant to a certain standard, that does not protect you from being hacked or breached, and this is something that you have to take seriously. The next group of slides is related to the bread and butter of this presentation. It is compliance and security risks. Here we'll actually start with the first risk. When I was creating the presentation, I was wondering on how to structure it, and I was trying to find more security and compliance risks. And the first thing that came to my mind as a compliance risk was the legal action that you might face if you don't comply to a certain standard. And then I walked out and tried to find other things which are strictly related to compliance. And I couldn't find more than federal audits, for example. So compliance, the definition of compliance risk is actually facing the exposure to legal penalties and material loss for a certain organization. That is the definition for compliance risk. And then you might get attacked by customers, by employees, depending on the certain standard, or you might actually get audited from the federal organizations. This usually happens when you deal with government data, or the breach is so huge that it leaks, for example, social security numbers, something that is really important to every organization. And this is the first risk that I will give you more information on how we at Progress deal with that. The first thing that we do is that we actually have hired I think quite a significant group of people which are reviewing every single compliance to a standard that we hold, and the only job that they have is to review if we are compliant or not. And they have the responsibility and to escalate that to the engineering or whatever function has broken the control. And this is really, really important. They actually do internal audits of products that we are just releasing. So we make sure that they are compliant once they reach the 1 year period, for example. The next thing that we have implemented is something more of an engineering side. We have automated alarms for every control that we provide evidence for. Let's take, for example, SOC 2. We have to gather user information on who walked in and when into production. And if that thing got broken, then this will raise an alarm that will be high priority for the whole organization to fix. Because we can't stay like that without logging who has access and what they did in the production environment. Let's take a look at the sizes of risks that you might get here in terms of financial loss. In terms of financial loss, for example, for GDPR, if you deal with European customers, you might get up to 4% fine based on your yearly revenue. So that's quite a huge number. And another example is HIPAA. I think last year we had 16 million fine for a company, and this is also a huge risk for the organization. The next risk is data breaches. This is more of a like catch-all slide. So if you get data breached, everything will get bad. And the first thing that will happen after you get breached is that you have to inform your customers, the media, the public, your employees, and then your company reputation will suffer quite a lot. You all have read different articles on who get hacked when, for example, Yahoo, Marriott. There are countless number of organizations that get hacked and their data will get leaked in any way. I would bet that every organization will get breached in one way or another. The question is how to protect your data when you get breached. The second thing that will follow after you damage your reputation will be the lost revenue from your customers that are leaving the company or are not buying your products because they are afraid that something will happen or their data will leak because it happened already one time. And what I forgot to say is that it will be really, really hard for you to recover after you get breached. Even if you spend billions on PR, it will stay in the internet and people will remember that one way or another. The next consequences from data breaches are actually a small problem for most of the organizations. The first one is the lost time for investigating everything. So if you have some organizations actually stop operating for a few months or even years after they got breached. That is because they want to fix everything. They want to find the root cause, and it might take time because they don't understand where it came from. And one of the next risks actually will emphasize on how long this period could be. The next one that you might face is possible services downtime. This will affect your customers if they are using a platform like Kinvey, for example. When you have developers which are using your platform and they are holding their data inside your platform, this might prove problematic because their users will receive hit as well, and the whole operation will stop. It will not be only your operation; it will be operation of your customers. So what we at Progress do, I actually expanded that in a different slide because there are quite a lot of things that we do. The first thing that we do is we automated deletion of all unnecessary data. So we don't hold anything which is old or stale or something that we already don't need. For example, if a customer stops using our platform, they just delete their data, and if they don't, we do that for them in order to prevent their data to be breached in such risky environment. Then the next thing we have is data prevention protection. This is in order to prevent leakage from our systems. How this works is we actually use a combination of IDS and network rules, which raise alarms if they detect abnormal traffic in and out of our databases. This includes actually even our front-facing services. So if we discover something like that, we shut down our servers, and then we have to investigate something further. It didn't get used so far, but we just have it just in case. Server cache actually also gets invalidated if we discover something abnormal. This is something that we can easily delete, and it's not really risky because we can easily build that after a while if nothing happens. Network isolation, I've put that point here because we implement several fire gates in order to get to access your production data. The first gate is, for example, from this laptop. In order to get to log in here, that's a common file gate. You have to use your Active Directory credentials and two-factor authentication token. This is easy because almost everyone implements that. The next one is VPN to our internal network. After that, in order to get access to our production hop-in hosts, then you have to provide again, but this time provide two-factor authentication codes, but this time different application. And once we get inside the production environment, you have different roles for different people, and once they log in our systems, they get only temporary access, and that whole thing gets locked in another lock. And just to make sure that lock is actually exported to another account, so we can investigate if something happened without interruption. The next thing is, of course, the least privilege principle. We don't give access to anyone in the organization. We give access to only people who actually need that access. Encryption at rest and no HTTP communication are rules which are basic, and nobody can break them. And the last one is also something that we have implemented. We scan all emails of our employees. This is really important. I'll give you more examples after that. The next principle is shared responsibility. During our time in progress, we discovered that most of our customers were ignoring the fact that when they deploy into a compliant platform that resolves many of the issues, like caring for who has access to physical servers, how that's managed, how that's backed up, and everything associated with hosting a platform, they forget that they bear the responsibility and accountability to configure everything that exposes their data. Let's take Kinway, for example. If you want to expose your data to a chatbot or a mobile application, then you have to configure endpoints in order to expose that data. And nobody is stopping you from exposing it for anonymous users in the wild. And if you do that, then most probably your data will get found by somebody, and they will expose that by breaching it. The next thing is a little bit more vague, but I'll explain what happens here. It is one of the examples is actually the inception exploit. This exploit was used in order to spy on high-level government officials, and it was discovered by a security researcher which reported it to Microsoft. What it is about is when you send a document to an employee, and if they open that, it's like RTF document or Word document. When they open that, it executes custom code which they have provided with the document. And some of the services like Microsoft OneDrive, Google Drive, or Dropbox are storing some of their credentials inside some folder or in an encrypted way on your PC. In order to give you better user experience, they are caching your credentials or your session in some way. So that source that gets executed finds that credentials and delivers them to the hacker through a botnet. Once they have those credentials, an automated system leaks everything from your account. What could be stored there is depending on your organization, of course. You can have guides which are saying on how to log into production. You can have databases with customer contracts or data, or you can have credentials for your production environment. It really depends on what ended up there. But I know that some of those are mistakes, like holding credentials in OneDrive, or customer contracts or customer data, of course. But some companies do that, And once you do that, and if somebody hacks that account, you're almost forced to face the action after that. The next thing I've put here is I decided that will be appropriate for insider threat. So who are the insiders and who comes that insider threat from? Insiders usually, when I think about insiders, that's people who are really malicious inside the company. They are employees and they really hate the company and want to do damage. But that's not the only group that can do damage to your data and can expose you to this threat. The rest of the people that could do the same damage are people who are negligent. They can open ports just to make it easy for them to do a certain job, like test your production environment or any other case that comes to their mind. And the last group of people are people who don't know that they actually breached their organization. Let's take, for example, this laptop. Once I'm in Omni, if I leave my room and the laptop is there, I'll have to understand that there is hotel stuff that might get inside my room and they can leak the whole data that is on my laptop, even if that's encrypted using, for example, BitLocker or other way of encryption at your laptop. As I gave you an example, I already found a few zero-day bugs. So I know that if I have access to a zero-day bug and I can exploit it, I can just come to your laptop and it's mine. So you have to limit your physical access to your device. We have one guy here who locked his laptop in his safe. So when I understood that, I was like, yes, that's what you should do. When you come to a hotel, you have to lock your laptop in the safe. How big that threat is? Over 20% of cybersecurity incidents happen with the involvement of an insider. This is 1 in every 5 cybersecurity incidents. That's a huge number. And over 15% of data breaches are involving insiders. You have to think about that because that's one of the biggest risks that you will face. Even worse is that you will not discover that like you would if the breach came from outside, because you would have IDS systems, you would have all the different ways to mitigate risks from outside. But insiders are a bigger problem because companies usually trust them and they are not audited in the same way you would do for external threats. The next risk here is malware injection. I've said usually when I think about malware is some kind of virus or something, but this includes all the source code that can be executed in a certain environment. So what hackers would really be happy to do is to execute a source code inside your cloud deployment, which is hosted behind DMZ, and everything is secure, so you don't protect yourself so much when they execute that source code. How do we protect that inside Progress? Protect from that inside Progress? For one of the services that we provide in Kinvey is called Flex. This is a serverless environment which allows Node.js execution inside the cloud deployment. This is used mainly for manipulating your data or executing different events based on different schedules. And you can put anything inside. How do we protect from that? The first thing we do is we host all of that source code inside containers. That's why I have written containers many times here. It's containers, 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 because our whole security around Kinvey Flex is based mainly on containers. The second thing we do is when we execute inside those containers, we remove all privileged users. There was a vulnerability in Docker a while ago, and it abused the fact that people had privileged users in their containers. So when that bug was discovered, we weren't vulnerable because we basically removed all privileged users inside the containers. And one other thing that we do is something that everybody will understand, is to limit all network access inside the network. Everything to the internet is exposed, but you can't access any internal resource because you might execute another flex function with different parameters, and that might be problematic to any customer of ours. The other things we do use are things like C groups, but I won't get into too much details about that. The last one is post-compliance calmness. This thing here is really a big problem because only 1 in every 3 companies remain compliant 1 year after they got certified. And the reason for this, that's official survey actually from Verizon as well, but I didn't put it in here. The reason that happens is because they kind of sit on the chair and relax because they actually got certified and they resolved all security issues. Everything that might be problematic in their organization is resolved, so they can lay back and implement some customer-facing features or just open up everything because they got the certificate. There is no problem that they may face. And how do we at Progress deal with that? As I said, we have a whole team which is dedicated only for compliance. And the other thing we do is we don't follow compliance as a blueprint. We just take security as a mindset, and once we have security as a mindset, we implement all the proactive efforts in order to secure everything and avoid being breached. And once you spend too much time into fixing things about security, then you end up almost compliant to anything because you have resolved most of the security issues that you faced. This is our experience for most of our standard compliance efforts, is that we just, once we decide, for example, to be HIPAA compliant, we gather all the evidence that we already have, and we just present that to the auditor instead of implementing something specific to the standard. So far, we didn't have a compliance effort which required to implement something specific for that group of data. And what I wanted to say is, what will the auditor community do about this? Because this is a problem. And from what I know, there are some researches which are going on the implementation of ongoing efforts, something similar to what we at Progress do. Some company which is an auditor will continuously hook into all evidence that is gathered by the system, and they will do continuous audits and automated alarms on that, as much as we do in Progress. Some of those ideas, of course, will be based on AI or blockchain, but it depends on who gets there first. So if you have to remember one sentence from all of those risks, is that you have to take security as a mindset, and once you take security as a mindset, you will reach understanding of all of those risks and how to mitigate them. You will actually invent different ways to mitigate them, and you will improve your whole security, and you will protect your company from bad reputation and lost revenue. And that's what I had so far. That's from me. And if you have any questions, please come to me after the session, and we'll talk about that.